Hello all, it's James Johnson, aka Sulfur Blade, and I'm here with an election, or not an election, a video. I haven't done a video in a few days now, and this one's pretty big. So, I don't know about you guys, but some of the quote-unquote Sidney Powell fallout that we witnessed last couple of days, where was she fired? Was she not actually part of the team? All this and that and the other thing. I don't give a shit at this point, because she has actually released the Kraken. She has dropped lawsuits in Georgia and Michigan. I've got the Georgia lawsuit in front of me right now. I've already read through 40 pages of the 105 pages, and it's really, really good. It comes at Georgia in 17 different directions. There are so many different avenues of not necessarily fraud, but problems that Georgia needs, that a court in Georgia would have to address. Any one of these avenues would be, well, a fairly big deal. But all of them together represents an overwhelming amount of holy crap. So let's give you some ideas of what's dropped here. So she did go full Dominion voting system, conspiracy theory in this complaint. However, this is only one of the avenues that she is attacking from. It's not the only one, and in fact, she actually has evidence to back up these claims, as she cites throughout this. Anyway, you go through that, then you go to what I consider some of the best arguments. If we get through here a ways, some of the best arguments are somewhere in this area. Where was it? Right here. The Georgia Election Code instructs those who handle absentee ballots to follow a clear procedure. So right now she is quoting Georgia law about how it's supposed to work. Upon receipt of each absentee ballot, a register or clerk shall write the day and hour of the receipt of the ballot on its envelope. The registrar or clerk shall then compare the identifying information on the oath with the information on file in his or her office. It shall compare the signature or make on the oath with the signature or mark on the absentee elector voter's card or the most recent update to such absentee elector voter registration card and application for absentee ballot, or a facsimile of said signature or maker taken from said card or application, and shall, if the information and signature appear to be valid and other identifying informations appear to be correct, so certify by signing or initializing his or her name below the voter's oath. Each elector's name so certified shall be listed by the registrar or clerk on the numbered list of absentee ballots absentee voters prepared for his or her precinct. Under Georgia legislature, it also establishes a clear and efficient process to be used by county officials if they determine that an elector has failed to sign the oath on the outside of the envelope enclosing the ballot, or that the signature does not conform with the signature on file in the registrar's or clerk's office. The Georgia legislature also provided for the steps to be followed by county officials with respect to defective absentee ballots. The elector has failed to sign the oath, or if the signature does not appear to be valid, or if the elector has failed to furnish required information, or information so furnished does not conform with the file in the register or clerk's office, or if the elector is otherwise found disqualified to vote, the registrar or clerk shall write across the face of the envelope "rejected," giving the reason. Therefore, the Board of Registrars or absentee ballot clerk shall promptly notify the elector of such rejection, a copy of which shall be retained in the files of the Board of Registrars or absentee ballot clerk for at least 1 year. So these are very clear-cut, set-in-stone rules that are supposed to be followed as created by the Georgia legislature, which is the only body, according to the United States Constitution, that can create rules for the election. So whatever the Georgia legislature rules are, that's what matters, right? No other body can set the rules. Only the Georgia legislature, according to the United States Constitution. So as we continue on here, defendants' unauthorized actions violating the Georgia Election Code and cause the processing of defective absentee ballots. Notwithstanding the clarity of the applicable statutes and the constitutional authority for Georgia election actions, on March 6, 2020, the Secretary of State of Georgia, Secretary Raffensperger, and the State Elections Board, who administered the state elections, the administrators, entered into a compromise and settlement agreement and release. The litigation settlement with the Democratic Party of Georgia, the Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee, and the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee collectively, the Democrat Party agencies, setting forth different standards to be followed by the clerks and registrars in processing absentee ballots in the state of Georgia. What does this mean? This means that by the authority of the Secretary of State of Georgia, Secretary Raffensperger, and the State Election Board, in conjunction with these Democrat agencies, they changed the rules. Not the state legislature. The state legislature is the only body constitutionally that can set the rules of the election. Under the settlement, however, the administrators agreed to change the statutorily prescribed manner of handling absentee ballots in a manner that is not consistent with the laws promulgated by the Georgia legislature for the election in this state. The settlement provides that the Secretary of State would issue an official election bulletin to county administrators overriding the statutory procedures described for those officials. That power, however, does not belong to the Secretary of State under state constitution. The settlement also changed the signature requirements, reducing it to a broad process with discretion rather than enforcement of signature requirements as statutorily required under Georgia law. The Georgia legislature instructed county registers and clerks, the county officials regarding the handling of absentee ballots under Georgia law. The Georgia Election Code instructs those who handle absentee ballots to follow a clear procedure. Upon receipt of each ballot, a registrar or clerk shall write the day and hour of the receipt of the ballot on its envelope. The registrar or clerk shall then compare the identifying information on the oath with the information on file in his or her office, shall compare the signature or make on the oath with the signature or mark on the absentee elector's voter's card, or the most recent update to such absentee elector voter registration card and application for absentee ballot or facsimile of said signature or maker taken from said card or application, and shall, if the information and signature appear to be valid and other identifying information appear to be correct, so certify by signing or initializing his or her name below the voter's oath. The Georgia legislature prescribed procedures to ensure that any requests for an absentee ballot must be accompanied by sufficient identification of elector's identity. Georgia law. Providing in pertinent part, in order to be found eligible to vote, an absentee ballot in person at the registrar's office or absentee ballot clerk's office. Such person shall show one of the forms of identification listed in code section whatever. And affiant testified under oath, blah, 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 blah. I could keep reading this, but you get the concept of this one avenue that she's coming after Georgia from. And this is just one of many avenues that she's coming after Georgia from. But I think that this is probably the number one single-handed best avenue because, well, it's right there in Georgia law. United States Constitution says the only body in a state that can dictate how the law is to be prescribed for election voting inside of a state is the state's legislative body. That's the United States Constitution that says that. So the laws that the Georgia legislature had in place were not followed this election. They were ignored. They were considered to be optional. They went with new laws that were delineated down from the Georgia Secretary of State and the Election Committee. It doesn't work that way. You can't just make up your own rules. You have to follow Georgia state legislative laws. That's the only body that can make rules pertaining to the Georgia election. Evidently, Michigan's done the same thing. So that simple argument right there is going to win this whole thing for Trump. Because you can't argue with the Constitution. You can't argue with the rule of law, especially inside of a courthouse. If this somehow was to make it past the Georgia courthouse, which I doubt it will, because any Georgia judge is going to read this and be like, yeah, it's clear cut. You need to follow the Georgia law, and you're not following the Georgia law. Fix it. If it somehow makes it past a Georgia courthouse and makes it up to the Supreme Court, you know what they're going to say. So, I mean, I know a lot of us have been rather, I don't know, kind of feeling maybe a little blue, or kind of feeling a little defeated. It feels like maybe Trump's giving up, and then there was the whole Sidney Powell black eye thing, you know, but here it is. I think she's outdone herself with this lawsuit. It's excellent. And yeah, it comes at this problem in so many different directions. And it's a completely legal lawsuit too. I forgot to point that out. So there's a certain subset of people that are allowed to challenge the certification of the vote, and one subset of people that is allowed to challenge the certification of a vote are the actual nominated electors. And so this this isn't Sidney Powell as the plaintiff. This is all of the Republican electors who would have been voting for Trump had he won fair and square in Georgia that have brought this lawsuit, and Sidney Powell is representing them. So this is a completely legitimate lawsuit on behalf of people that have skin in the game. So the court needs to actually take this account into merit. It's not to say that a normal you and me or a normal Joe Schmo off the street can't say, hey, we want to file a lawsuit, but it's a little more credence when it's the actual electors bringing the lawsuit, because constitutionally they're the ones that are supposed to challenge. That's their whole purpose as being electors. Is when it was originally created, the electors were supposed to be like a secondary stopgap to keep the system in check. But at some point, state laws and state jurisdictions have taken the individualism out of the elector, which is a whole different story, right? Technically, an elector was promised to represent the vote of the populace, but that elector could vote the other way. That was the way the system was originally set to work. And in fact, in our history, there's actual it actually happened where electors went against what the voters wanted and voted for the other candidate. Since then, that didn't sit with some people, and there's been rules that have been put. Well, there's been rules put in place, but the constitutionality of said rules is a whole other story. So. But I didn't even want to get into this ball of weeds, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just going to shut up and say, if you're interested in finding out about that, go ahead and do your research, because that's a whole new ball of weeds. I'm just going to try to avoid saying something that might be considered wrong. But anyway, this lawsuit, really good. And it should bring a smile to your face, should add a little pep to your step, knowing that these excellent lawsuits have been filed in Georgia and Michigan on behalf of Trump. Well, not really on behalf of Trump, but on behalf of us, the voters. Trump is just the beneficiary, obviously. And she's not the only lawyer on this project. So she is one really good lawyer who's brought these very big lawsuits in Michigan and Georgia. Lynn Wood, I think that's his name. He is bringing his own sets of lawsuits on behalf of other individuals. So it's actually kind of a good thing that the quote-unquote Trump legal team has been, I don't know, separated, because that's just multiple more lawsuits, and all of them are really good lawsuits being brought to the table instead of one major lawsuit. So the more lawsuits there are, the better, right? Ultimately, one of the ways that Trump can win is just by overloading the system and keeping this thing wrapped up in the courts so that the states do not actually certify. They don't get to certify. And if the states don't get to certify, then Biden doesn't have a majority. And if Biden doesn't have a majority, then we have to figure out who the president is through the legislature. And contrary to some strange stuff you may have seen online, no, the House of Representatives doesn't vote to find out who the next president is, though the representatives of each state do, however, in a way. So let's take California, for instance. California has many different representatives. They've got, for instance, they've got the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy. They've got the outgoing majority leader, Nancy Pelosi. They've got Devin Nunes. They've got crazy Maxine Waters. But if you actually count up all of the Senate, or not the senators, but the representatives in the House of Representatives in California, there's actually more Republicans than there are Democrats. And so since the California legislature only gets one vote, California will vote Republican because there's more Republican representatives in the legislature than there are Democrat representatives in the legislature. Now translate that to all of the states, and Trump wins. Quite handily, actually. Anyway, that is one way that Trump could win. That's the way that the Democrats are freaking out about right now. They're calling it "quote unquote" a coup, even though it is actual system in place in the United States of how to handle the very situation that looks like it's coming down the pike. If there's not a majority in the electoral party because states did not certify their votes, then you figure it out this way. That's not a coup, right? That's a system that's been in place. That's just following the system to get to the end result. However, this could actually also end before that. It could end very much the way it ended in the year 2000 when the Supreme Court weighed in on who was president, right? I don't know if that's going to happen this time around, but it could. The Supreme Court could take the ball out of the legislature's hands, if you will, and dictate who the president is. So that's another path. Or there's the path that the courts, to include the Supreme Court, don't side with Trump, and that all the court proceedings are figured out judiciously, and Trump's legal avenues are exhausted, and the states certify, and they certify for Biden. Even though most of us understand that there's election fraud. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? In 2016, you watched the Democrats melt down on TV. You saw them just go, oh my God, and they started conceding and how they lost the election and how the polls got it wrong. And then in 2020, it was a complete repeat. The Democrats melted down on TV. Mainstream media was all but giving it to Trump until 4 o'clock in the morning. They decided, oh, well, we're going to stop counting now. And then an hour and a half later, without telling anyone, they started counting again. And then all these swing states magically flipped, just magically got the number of votes that they needed. Like in Wisconsin, the 169,000 votes that came in the last second that put Wisconsin just over the top. Mind you, there's good news about those 169,000 votes that came in last second that put Wisconsin just over the top. That's a completely different lawsuit that doesn't have anything to do with this one here being filed by Sidney Powell. But there's a completely different lawsuit being filed in the state of Wisconsin in regards to those 169,000 votes that were quote-unquote absentee ballots. Well, the state of Wisconsin generally has between 2,000 and 5,000 absentee ballots in any given presidential year. Not 169,000 from one city of Milwaukee. Why does this matter? You're like, but James, we know that the Democrats had mass mail-in balloting. No, not in the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin only permitted actual requested absentee ballots. And in order to get an absentee ballot, you have to have a reason. You have to be physically unable to go and vote. There has to be some sort of medical reason that warrants you deserve said absentee ballot. And COVID is not one of those reasons. In fact, COVID was specifically cited by the court as not being a reason for an absentee ballot in the state of Wisconsin. However, 169,000 absentee ballots, far more than normal, came in at the last second and put Joe Biden over the top in Wisconsin. All of those votes are very much in question. And if those go away, Trump wins Wisconsin. He'll go back to being 120,000 votes ahead like he was before those 169,000 votes dropped that were just about all for him, with some tiny, minuscule portion of them being for Trump. Anyway, I digress. So that's another good avenue. So Wisconsin could very seriously flip. That's 10 electoral votes. Michigan could very seriously flip. That's 16 electoral votes. Georgia could very seriously flip. Wait, no, Michigan's more than 16. Georgia's 16. Michigan's something. 18 maybe? I don't know. Anyway, and then Pennsylvania could easily get flipped because they decided that it would be okay to count ballots after Election Day. You've heard about this, right? Where all of these absentee ballots were mailed in, but they arrived after the election was over. Judge Alito said to make sure that all of those votes get separated, and they blew off the Supreme Court judge, or at least claimed to. But somebody smart figured out how to separate them or something or another. Anyway, to make a long story short, that's something like 700,000 votes. The majority for Biden. And if you throw out those votes, Trump wins Pennsylvania. Hands down. Easy. So Pennsylvania is very much seriously in contention for Trump. Wisconsin's very much seriously in contention. Michigan's very much in contention. Georgia's very much in contention. I didn't even bring Nevada up because it's, only 6 votes, but it could very seriously go to Trump too. So this thing isn't over, folks. Not by a long shot. Anyway, I'm Jaames Johnson, aka Sulfurblade. This is my content where I'm bringing you to speed. The Kraken has been dropped in Georgia. Sidney Powell has kept her word, and all the crazy stuff she said on TV about Dominion voting and this and that, it's right here, folks. She's brought it into legal ease and has evidently got backed up exhibits and testimony, etc., that's supposedly going to back up this quote-unquote conspiracy theory. To basically, that's a whole other avenue that she's coming at this from. And then, yeah, there's still more. If you guys want to read this, I will probably put this link in the video. I think everyone should read it. It's good reading. It'll bring a smile to your face, at least. Anyway, again, I'm Jaames Johnson, aka Sulfurblade. This is my content. Hopefully you're enjoying it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.